Hello and welcome, everyone. See you all trickling in to join us. Thank you so much for being here tonight for this webinar on plant-based eating hosted by Les Dames d'Escoffier. I'm Lani Furbank and I'll be moderating tonight's panel. As we get everyone in here, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Just let us know where you're tuning in from and briefly tell us what your experience with plant-based eating has been so far. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. I see we already have a question about the recording. We will be recording tonight's discussion, so you can watch it again later or share it with others. And we're also going to leave a few minutes at the end for audience Q&A. So please feel free to pose questions for our panelists as you think of them as they come up. Please pop those in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And so we can make sure that we won't miss them in the chat as everyone's chatting and introducing themselves. And if you are introducing yourself in the chat, please make sure to click panelists and attendees so that everyone else can see where you're tuning in from as well, not just the panelists. It looks like we've got a great group here tonight, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Like I said, I'm Lani Furbank. I'm an environment writer, and I also covered food and dining for 5 years as a freelance journalist. In case you're not familiar with Les Dames, we are the International Organization of Women in Culinary Professions, founded in New York in 1973 to give a voice to women in food, wine, and hospitality industries. Today, the organization has grown to nearly 30 chapters across the US and Canada. Our grants, scholarships, mentoring, and community service programs are the hallmarks of the organization. Through chapter fundraising efforts, millions of dollars have been awarded in grants and scholarships and other philanthropic endeavors, and countless volunteer hours have been logged on behalf of chapter communities. Our DC chapter is the second largest in the organization, and our membership includes outstanding women who range from restaurateurs, chefs, and nutritionists to public relations professionals, university professors, to celebrated national TV stars and authors. So now turning to the topic of tonight's discussion, the reason you're all here. Plant-based eating is such an incredibly vast and varied topic. We're going to dive into it as much as we can in the hour we have together. As you all know, there are many different reasons people choose to pursue this lifestyle, from health benefits or environmental impact. And there are also many different ways to approach it, from veganism to prioritizing whole plant-based foods through a flexitarian diet. But the bottom line is the plant-based philosophy is growing rapidly and it's changing the way we eat, whether at restaurants or at home. In fact, according to the Plant-Based Foods Association, plant-based food sales increased 31% from 2017 to 2019. And that exponential growth is projected to continue, with estimates by some sources at around 12% per year. So here to talk about that and much more, we have 4 expert panelists who are going to share their experiences and insights on this multifaceted topic. I'll start us off with a bit of background on each, and then I'll turn it over to them. So we are thrilled to have Stacey Adams, the president of the DC chapter of Les Dames, as well as a professional chef, culinary instructor, and the owner of Tastings Gourmet Market, a European specialty food store in Annapolis, Maryland. Lee Crosby is a registered dietitian and the nutrition education program manager for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. She practices clinical dietetics at the Barnard Medical Center. Kristen Hartke is a food journalist, recipe developer, and photographer. She writes regularly for the Washington Post, NPR, Better Homes and Gardens, Eating Well, and other national publications, and she works with many chefs. And Dr. Daemon Jones, or Dr. Day, is a licensed naturopathic doctor who treats patients from across the DC metropolitan area, as well as virtually all over the world. She's an expert in using lifestyle as medicine to reduce chronic disease. So thank you all so much for taking the time to talk with us. To begin, I'd love for you each to tell us how and when you came to adopt a plant-based lifestyle and why you've continued with it. Dr. Day, let's start with you.
Thank you so much. So I actually have a funny story. The way that I started working with plant-based medicine is I went to a naturopath when I got out of college. My mom said, I want you to go talk to this lady. And this lady happened to be a naturopathic doctor in Washington, DC. And she was having me follow the Eat Right for Your Type diet. And so there are different types of diets out there. My blood type happens to be type A, which is a plant-based vegan diet. And so I come from my dad's family, are farmers. I grew up seeing pigs being slaughtered. We had country ham, like, all of that was part of my day to day. And I didn't know how to cook vegetarian and vegan. So I made the decision that if I didn't know how to make it, I just skip it. So beans, legumes, like protein, just didn't eat it. And by the time I went to naturopathic school, I was passing out in classes because I did not have the right balance in terms of the foods that I was eating for a plant-based diet. And so for me, it's really important, no matter what people choose to do, to make sure that you absolutely understand how to create a balanced diet. And if you want to be vegan, and I have a book that's called Eat More Plants that focuses on vegan eating completely. It talks about remembering that you have to create a balanced plate in order to get the right types of nutrition. So from personal experience, I'm trying to prevent other people from having the experience that I had, which was not knowing what to do and doing it badly.
Wonderful. Kristen, do you want to introduce yourself now?
Sure. So I probably have been on some kind of a plant-based diet since I was 2 years old. My brother became a vegetarian when he was 16 and I was 2. And my mom basically was like, all right, so I'll just cook for everybody, in this one specific way. I just think because she figured it was interesting. She likes to cook. She was interested in trying different kinds of recipes. And a couple years after that was when Frances Moore Lape's Diet for a Small Planet came out, which was, of course, a huge bestseller. And I actually have my mom's copy, like dog-eared copy. So I really grew up with that food. Now, when I was growing up, I mean, I think I went through periods of time as a child that were like, vegetarian, vegan. Sometimes there was like seafood in our diets, and it all kind of mattered, kind of mixed around. And then by the time I got to high school, I was eating a plant-based diet pretty much, and then kind of off and on again for a while. And then when I was in my early 20s, shortly after my husband and I got married, we actually were driving down the road, and we drove next to this. We were driving behind a truck full of cows, and we were talking about how sweet they were. And of course, then we pull up on the side of the truck, and it's like, Joe's Slaughterhouse or something like is emblazoned on the side of the truck. And and my husband grew up in a German. His parents are German. He grew up in a German, very meat-centric family, but he's super open-minded himself, and so. And he obviously knew what my history was with eating. And so he kind of turned to me at that moment and he said, that's it. Like, we have to stop, we can't eat any animals. And I'm like, great, if you're on board with this, perfect. So, and so we've been that way ever since. And we raised our daughter, who is now 25, plant-based. And she's very proud of that. That's like a big part of her identity. So I've been doing it for a long time.
That's great. Lee, take it away.
Sure. So no one is more surprised that I am plant-based than me. Never in a million years would I have thought that I would be eating a full-on vegan diet, and yet here I am. But the reason for that was actually it was kind of selfish reasons. When I was just 30 years old, they found what they called, what did they term it? A thickened area in one of my breasts, and I actually opted, instead of having a biopsy, because I'd actually just had another procedure, I opted to have that breast checked like every 3 months by a breast surgeon for a year, and see if it changed. And so I'm something of an anxious person. So I also, while that was going on in the waiting period, I was scouring the science. I had a biology background. I wanted to learn everything I could possibly do to reduce my risk of breast cancer. And I landed on plant-based eating, staying nice and active. And then I am sorry for some on this call who will not love this part, and also cutting alcohol. The struggle was real, but so I did. And after 3 months, and then 6 months, and then 9 months, that lump was totally stable. There was no change. And then it's kind of a long story. I fell off the wagon. I stopped exercising and I started eating like a fairly meaty diet. When I went back for my final checkup, which should have been in 3 months, but it was actually 4 months because I was feeling very like, oh, I got this. Nothing's going to go wrong. I'm good. In just 4 months on that new routine, the lump that had been totally stable doubled in size. I had a lumpectomy within a week and the cells came back looking atypical. So not cancer, which was great, but on their way to being cancer at the age of 30. So needless to say, I got right back to eating plant-based and being active. Like I'm not perfect, but it's been nearly 10 years now and knock on wood, so far, so good. And then also given my personal experience with how powerful plant-based nutrition could be, I actually went back. I had sort of dabbled in nutrition to that point. I went back and finished out the coursework to become a registered dietitian, went through the dietetic internship. So yeah, now I see patients for medical nutrition therapy. I also do nutrition education. I do some clinical research work as well. And I also work on a campaign with the Physicians Committee called Let's Beat Breast Cancer, which is all about 4 basic steps that women everywhere can use to reduce their breast cancer risk. And step 1 is eating more plant foods. So that is my story. And I will say bonus, my husband, who was from Texas and had all the, he basically was accepted into the family by eating 7 steaks in a row. That sort of tells you about both of our backgrounds. He went plant-based and moral support. And of course he dropped like 25 pounds without trying and his blood pressure normalized. So it was pretty good impetus to stick with it.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Stacey.
Yeah, so my journey to going whole food plant-based started actually several months ago, but my body was telling me 2 years ago that something's not right. I had a lot of pain in my joints, my feet. I thought maybe I was, allergic to gluten, so I gave up gluten, and some of that pain went away. But I was having so many symptoms that were impacting my gut, and I started seeing a gastroenterologist, and we looked at everything. Do I have celiac? Do I have other intolerances? Couldn't find anything wrong, and at the end of June of 2020, kind of in the middle of COVID, I was experiencing some severe pain in my lower abdomen. And over the course of 24 hours, I was bowled over and I was throwing up the worst stuff. And I went to the emergency room and was admitted right away. And I didn't go home for 4 days. And it turned out after doing CAT scans and a lot of antibiotics that I had an infection that was so severe that had I not been seen right away, it could have just totally ruptured and matters would have been worse. That's not why I went plant-based. What happened after that, though, is that I came home and I'm so sluggish. I'm gray and pale. I can't even climb up my stairs. And I'm just feeling awful. I can't eat much. In 2 weeks, I lost close to 25 pounds. And I'm contacting my GI doctor, and he's like, I don't know why you're not getting better. You've been on all these antibiotics, you should be better. So we did more blood work, and he saw one hormone that was kind of off. So he referred me to a endocrinologist. And the endocrinologist did more blood work, took an ultrasound of my thyroid, and the diagnosis turned out to be that I now have an autoimmune disease called Graves' disease, which then also turns into hyperthyroidism. And many people are familiar with hypothyroidism, meaning you have a sluggish thyroid and you tend to gain weight. Well, mine is hyper, which means like I'm a freight train constantly burning calories, but at the same time, my heart rate constantly, I couldn't sleep at night because I could just hear my heart racing and racing. So the ultrasound on the thyroid was to understand how inflamed it is and were there any signs of cancer. And fortunately, they're not. It's just inflamed. So like Lee, I do a deep dive into the research. I have a background in pharmaceuticals, in diabetes and osteoporosis and allergies. So I know how to read medical journals. And I just read and read and read and read. And then I started listening to podcasts. I started listening to the experts out there. And there was, suggestions that a whole food plant-based diet could help. My GI doctor said, it's not going to help. My endo said, diet's not going to do anything. And on my second blood work with my endo, I told her what I was doing. I said, I'm 30 days in. We had to take blood. And I said, could you please do a lipid panel? I said, I know I have high cholesterol. Can you please do this? And my GI was like, your cholesterol doesn't go down that fast. Well, I got the results back. My cholesterol dropped 40 points in 30 days. I'm almost perfect on my cholesterol right now. So you asked why we continue to do it. That's motivation for me. I want to get healthy, and I believe that there's a gut thyroid connection, and I'm learning all about that because I have to first heal my gut before my thyroid's going to get better, and this is going to help. So I'm very, very, very passionate about this, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation.
Oh, thank you. Well, so that story, and Lee, your experience with your health-based impetus to find plant-based eating, I'm sure that's not uncommon with so many folks out there. So I was hoping that Dr. Day and Lee, you could start us off by diving into that science a little bit. What are the health benefits to eating a plant-based diet, and what kinds of positive changes like those stories have you seen with your clients?
Dr. Day, you want to start us off?
Sure. So the first thing that I just want to piggyback off is something that Stacey said, which is one of the things we learned in naturopathic school is treat the gut for everything. So it's not just about the thyroid, but if it's diabetes or osteoporosis, or you're dealing with menopause, which I work with so many women that are struggling with some type of hormonal imbalance. If you think about the purpose of the digestive system, it's actually to absorb nutrients. And so we want to eat foods that are strong in nutrients, and plants are strong in nutrients. So if we think about it in a very simple way, if we think about the colors of the rainbow, where are we going to find the most colors of the rainbow? We're going to find them in plant-based foods. Now, it isn't to say that you can get a piece of salmon, right? A piece of salmon is different than a piece of haddock, right? So you can still get colors of the rainbow and other foods. But if we look at plant-based as a generality, you have so many beautiful colors, and the more colors you eat, you can think about the more nutrients that you're bringing into your body, no matter what your health concern is. And so I always recommend that people eat plant-based. And before 10 years ago, plant-based meant plants. It meant like things that were grown in the earth. And now plant-based could mean, a meat product that was synthesized in the lab, which is not what I meant. So I have to now remember to say whole food, plant-based foods is what I'm going to be speaking about when I talk about, eating more plants. That's why I named the book that, because it's these colors of the rainbow that we're eating that give us vitamins and minerals and nutrients, which are things that we need for every different condition. So I could tell lots of stories about that. I want to just give Lee an opportunity to speak as well. And then, I'll give you guys some stories maybe a little later.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Day. I would echo that those colorful plant foods are the superstars of the nutrition world. So definitely include them every single day, as many colors as you can. So again, since I came at this from really the sort of scientific literature side, I kind of wanted just to touch on it because there's so much literature on this and it doesn't really get that much, airtime. But research is pretty clear that when people eat a plant-based diet, whether totally vegan or whether it's mostly plant-based, they have a reduced risk, right, of heart disease, of type 2 diabetes, of certain cancers, of overweight and obesity, chronic kidney disease. I mean, even a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. And again, this is, now I will say again, echoing what Dr. Day said, that this is eating more of those whole food types of plant foods and not like, I mean, chips and Coke, those are vegan, right? Woohoo! But like, those are not, not what we're going for here. So in the clinic, I just to give some examples of what I've seen diabetes type 2 effectively disappear, which they now call remission. You're not allowed to call it reversal, but you see it go into remission. And people are always shocked because people are eating these carbohydrate rich whole plant foods and their blood sugar drops. But that's the way it works. Your own insulin starts to work better. And when you're eating these whole plant foods and keeping the saturated fat in particular, but fat in general, sort of on the lower side. So that's one thing. Blood pressure dropping. I mentioned it happened to my husband, but it's great to see it happen for patients too. So that happens. Cholesterol, as Stacey noted, tends to drop into the normal range and fairly quickly. Again, it's a pretty quick process for most people. Women's health issues tend to improve. Fibroids in particular, I've seen some really great results with. On the other side of the thyroid page, I actually saw a patient with Hashimoto's whose TPO, or those antibodies that attack the thyroid, actually fall into the normal range on a plant-based diet. Again, whole food, plant-based diet. Now, I don't know of a lot of scientific literature to back that up, but again, just anecdotally, I've seen it happen. Improvements in kidney function for those with chronic kidney disease. And then some of the more like general, like, oh, hey, I have more energy, I feel lighter. Like that's a big plus just from a day-to-day standpoint. And then I have to brag on my own mom a little bit, but she's actually the one who got me turned on to plant-based eating as something to research in terms of breast health. And so when I started doing that research and I decided to go plant-based again for moral support, I was really lucky. I had the husband and the mom both on board. She went on a plant-based diet and I career changed, like I mentioned, into nutrition. So she was my first client. We worked together for 2.5 years. She lost 90 pounds. Again, it wasn't just like a magical straight line down. As for most people, it was ups and downs along the way. But this is after menopause. This is in her mid to late 60s when most women assume it can't be done. She was on blood pressure medicine, high blood pressure. Her blood pressure came down and she actually sent me, we're a little on the dorky side, my family. She actually sent me a picture of her blood pressure monitor. And you want your blood pressure under 120/80, generally speaking, especially if you're not on meds. She's not on meds and it was 100/61. So she sent me a picture of it because she was so proud. So I was so proud of her. And again, she's 72, no meds. So go mom. All right. So those are some of the advantages, but I do want to echo again, these are whole food, plant-based foods, not the processed, is that recognizable as something that grew out of the ground? Not those kinds of foods.
Yeah, I just want to say really quickly a couple of other things that you didn't mention, that a lot of people have gastrointestinal issues. They don't want to talk about that they're having pooping problems or constipation, gas and bloating, things that intercede with your day-to-day activities and make you feel uncomfortable in groups. And when you think about plant-based, you can think about it as like a broom to like sweep out all of the bad things. So when we think about that, I work with a lot of women that have menopausal issues and symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, and that the foods that you eat and eating a proper and balanced diet and making sure that it's at least 80% can do huge things for that. And then the last thing that I just want to mention, because I know people kind of have this like on the brain, is if you think about things like anxiety, if you think about depression, if you think about Alzheimer's, there have been tests that there was a study that was done in Australia where literally people had mild depression. And half of the group stayed talking with talk therapy. And then half of the group actually went to a plant-based, whole foods, plant-based diet. And after 3 months, a lot of their symptoms went away. So there are a lot of mental, emotional issues that people are dealing with right now, in particular, the uncertainty of the pandemic and a lot of the social issues that are happening. And that food can be a very important piece and component and helping to people stabilize the things that are like really bothering them, like day to day, and a lot of those day-to-day symptoms. So I just wanted to bring up some of the mental, emotional pieces as well.
So on a practical level, all these benefits are fantastic. So for folks who want to take advantage of that and, live the plant-based lifestyle, how does that play out at home? Kristen and Stacey, I'm curious what you hear about as the most common challenges or concerns that people have with going plant-based at home, and how you recommend overcoming them.
You want to start, Kristen?
Sure. Well, I'm sure the number one thing, and everybody here will know what I'm going to say, is everybody worries about protein. That is always the number one thing. How am I going to get enough protein if I don't eat meat? And I don't mean to laugh, but it's kind of comical. So because protein is really not an issue. First of all, everything we vegetables and fruit and grains all have protein in them. So you really don't need meat in order to get protein. The second thing is that Americans are very protein obsessed, and we have an idea that we need to eat a lot more protein than we actually do because, and most likely because there have been very good lobbying campaigns to train Americans to think that they have to have, chicken, pork, beef, whatever is what's for dinner, So we have a lot of years to overcome of, that being so ingrained in our American culture. It's just such a huge part of really going back hundreds of years in American culture. It's just such a huge part of it. But the thing is, we actually need very little protein on a daily basis. And I mean, there are experts here who can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've written about this before, and I believe in my reporting, it's something like you need 200 calories a day out of an average 2,000 calorie a day diet or something. It's very, if you think about, that's really like 10% of the calories that you eat would need to come from protein. And you don't have to eat a whole lot of food to get to 200 calories from plants. And especially if for people who are concerned about it, I mean, legumes are an amazing source of protein. I mean, that's a very quick way to get it. And I will say that whenever I'm having a day where I feel, I'm feeling a little sluggish or something, I just pop a piece of tofu and I'm good, it perks me right up. So I think the first thing is people just sort of have to get out of this mindset of worrying about protein. I think what people should be doing is just making sure that they are, like everyone's already been talking about, having a really good assortment, having a rainbow on your plate and having a really good assortment of different kinds of foods, having some grains, having some legumes, having some fresh vegetables, having some fresh fruit. Like if you kind of concentrate on having some good fat, everybody needs some kind of fat in their diet. I mean, so all of those things, then, you're going to be totally fine. You're going to get the protein you need, and you're going to get the nutrition that your body needs to really function in a beautiful way.
That's great. I find that the more I discuss this at my store, which is a gourmet market that has a lot of stuff that's not whole food plant-based in it, that's slowly changing, because the more I have conversations with my customers, I'm finding they're having similar health issues. And I said, what would you think if I started doing this at the store? And they're like, oh my God, that would be wonderful. And so what I've done in my home test kitchen is start to change up. We have the most wonderful egg salad, chicken salad, all the stuff. And so I say, find your best recipes that you like to cook. Find 4 or 5 of them that you can know how to do. You don't need to look up anything, but then look at what goes in it and find everything that's not anything that's animal based that's in it, and find a proper substitute for it. And so I'm a little challenged with our egg salad. I got the flavor nailed. The texture is just a little off. I've tried the mashed up chickpea. I'm about to try hearts of palm, so it's things like that, but I've got the flavor nailed. And there's just other things, but in order for someone to truly commit to this, which I think is one of the hardest things, you try it out for a little bit and then it's hard. It really is a different way of thinking of how to cook. And so they say, oh, well, just go meal prep. But meal prep to me, what works for me on this is that I don't just have, chopped up carrots, chopped up broccoli, chopped up this, and it's not that. When I got home today, I took sweet potatoes and cut them in circles, and I roasted them with herb de Provence. Okay. And I took those organic zucchini and just sliced them straight across. They went in the oven at the same time. And I took some chickpeas that I had cooked the other day, and we import Umbrian chickpeas from Italy, but I put them on the tray with the sweet potatoes to roast them so that they'd get crunchier. So now I have different versions of these foods, and they all get stored in the fridge. So if I want to make now an Indian dish or an Italian dish or a Tex-Mex dish, I have all these ingredients to easily throw together. I'm not trying to come up with some grand recipe every single time. And, and I know we're going to talk about different recipes, but my advice to home cooks, people who really want to explore whole food plant-based, is find 4 or 5 recipes that that you love, and find the replacements for them and start to experiment. And then you can branch out from there. Then you can change seasonings. And so meal prep, just make it a little different by not just chopping things up and eating raw, because I think that people get tired of just salads. And my salads are bigger than my head. As I heard that you can always tell a vegan because she's got the biggest salad bowl. And I have a certain bowl. I hear this from a lot of people who eat this way. I got this one bowl that I love because it's this big, and I end up putting in the forbidden rice and some lentils and some kale and some arugula and corn that's sauteed, with some Tex-Mex spices. I love doing a Tex-Mex salad, and then I pour in salsa, so there's no oil, and with some avocado, and it's wonderful. So you can do it. You just have to, take it slow and, find things that work for you.
If I can piggyback on that, I mean, I think that the biggest, I think that and this is, me coming off of, a lifetime of this, and especially having raised a daughter, from birth, on plant-based diet, is that I've always found that people on the outside looking in assume that if you don't eat meat, that you are on a quote unquote diet, right? So that you are, trying to eat light all the time. And I think that is sometimes a huge part of the problem for people who are thinking about it, because they think, well, I don't want to eat rabbit food. I'm just going to be, eating these things that aren't satisfying. And that becomes this roadblock for people who then say, well, I'm not going to do it because I'm not going to ever eat things that are satisfying. I'm never going to feel full. I'm not going to feel like I've had something hearty to eat. And I think so. The first thing I always say is, like, it's not a diet. It's not a diet in the sense of, I'm not trying to eat light. I'm just trying to eat, compassionately and healthfully and mindfully, which is a completely different way of approaching it. And, I'm constantly playing with traditional recipes and coming up with other ways to make them. And to me, it's always about depth of flavor. That's what you need to figure out, is where do you find, the way to bring umami to a dish. How do you make something have really deep flavors and richness, and what are those building blocks that are going to get you there? And it's really, and I think there's a fairly easy list of things that anybody could have in their pantry that will get them there.
I want to say, for people that aren't as savvy but are interested, I might recommend something different than what Stacey recommends, which is do something completely different. because sometimes I feel like if people are like, oh, I'm used to whole milk, almond milk doesn't taste the same. It doesn't taste the same.
Right.
And it's not going to taste the same. So what might be better is that you decide to go for something, you know, completely different than what your favorites are if they're not the same. So people who are not savvy and are not really comfortable with spices and herbs, and that may not be this group, but I know that in the 19 years that I've been working with people, the thing that gives me huge satisfaction is I actually used to do cooking demos when I first graduated from school from PCRM. I did the cooking demos when they were you were able to go and do them for free and give people books and binders and all of that. And I got so much satisfaction in doing a cooking demo and someone saying, oh, I didn't like mushrooms, but I liked these mushrooms, or oh, I didn't like this particular ingredient, but the way that you made it, you know, was really good. And so for people that are kind of not good or picky or whatever, I might say try to pick a recipe that's different than what you're used to, that's plant-based, and try that, because you won't have an expectation that it's supposed to taste the way something else tastes. And then for people that do know how to cook or like playing, or like for me, it's a creative expression for myself, then I like to take the challenge on, like Stacey, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to figure out how to nail this. Like, you know, so it's like, I just want to give someone who maybe feels a little nervous about it, maybe a different option so that they can, you know, be successful.
Yeah, I agree.
We've heard a couple of myths come up, and I think that's something there is a lot of stigma and a lot of myths surrounding the idea of eating vegan, eating plant-based. So I'm curious, and specifically from a nutritional standpoint, Lee and Dr. Day, what nutrients should people be focused on or concerned about, and how do people find balance? Like, are things like, obviously we heard protein's not as much of a concern as everyone thinks it is. What about like calcium or stigmas around tofu and soy? What's the fact from fiction there? What should people be worried about and focused on to find balance in their diet?
Do you want to go first this time, Lee?
So the one that's most important that cannot be, you just need to take a supplement on a plant-based diet. Thank you. Dr. Day is nodding and she already knows what I'm going to say, and that is vitamin B12. It is not optional. Nothing is perfect. This is the one weakness with a plant-based diet. You need to supplement with vitamin B12. Now, in fairness, people who are over 50 should also supplement with B12. That's a general recommendation because we don't absorb it as well as we age. It's actually made by bacteria, predominantly in the guts of animals. They absorb small amounts of it into their flesh. And then when you eat the flesh, you get the B12 and in some of their, byproducts as well. Or you can just get a B12 supplement out of your pantry. Yes, things like nutritional yeast have B12, but they're not as reliable. So it's super simple just to take a supplement. We actually, in general, for healthy people who have good B12 levels, just to maintain them, our general recommendation at Barnard Medical Center is 100 micrograms a day, which is really low dose when you try and find a supplement that size. It's higher than the RDA. If you were to turn it over, it would be like, oh my gosh, like 1,000-something%, but you're not going to absorb all that. You're just going to absorb about the RDA. Yeah, Dr. Day's nodding. So, and some people need more. As you age, you might need more than 100 micrograms a day. So that's just a starting point. If you do decide to go plant-based, we always recommend that people within a year of going plant-based get those levels checked just to make sure you're on par. Like, you might be taking more than you need. You might be taking less. It's a very low risk thing to take more than you need. This is one, it's not like some of the like preformed vitamin A. If you take that could be toxic. B12 is not one of those. So if you take a little bit extra for a while, it's okay. If you don't get enough for a while, that can be a big problem. It can cause blood issues and nerve issues. So you don't want that. So that's the biggie. The other ones, the only other two that I really have seen people potentially miss, one of them is iodine. And for thyroid health, it's important. You want just enough, not too much. And the reason that people will miss it on a plant-based diet is actually because most Americans used to get their iodine from iodized salt. Iodized salt is not cool anymore. You have to have pink Himalayan salt. It has to look awesome. It has to be flaked. It has to be, but that means you're not getting the iodine that was added to iodized salt. And so most Americans are actually getting the majority of their iodine from dairy, which makes you think, oh, I should go drink milk. but it's actually coming, the majority of that iodine in milk is actually coming from the disinfectants they use on the cattle's udders. So you only need trace amounts, and that's what gets into the milk. So my general recommendation is I don't want people adding tons of salt, but when you use salt, please use iodized. And if you don't, there are some sea vegetables that, things like nori sheets that go around your sushi. They make those into snacks now. Those are great. Have those a few times a week. Super, you're covered. That's one. And then the other one that I think is important for everyone, whether they're eating plant-based or not, is vitamin D, just because humans were pretty much designed to be outside, and now we all live in here all day long. And in the winter, the reason I say that that's important is vitamin D is formed when sun strikes your skin. And how often is your skin exposed to the sun in February, right? So that's where it pays to take a supplement. People will say, oh, but there's vitamin D in milk. And it's like, yes, because they added it as a supplement. So that's one to make sure that you're getting at least the RDA, which I think it's 600 IU per day now, but usually we'll just have people go ahead and take 1,000. But ask your healthcare provider if you have any questions on that. Those are the 3 nutrients that I tend to want to make sure everyone's got bases covered on. Dr. Day, I am sure there are others.
Well, I think you nailed the most important ones. I know that in my practice, and I'm sure you guys do it as well, that we do more extensive lab testing. So we can make sure that people have the nutrients that they need, and that some of those are just kind of basic nutrients, and some of them are related to their individual issues and problems that they need and the support that they need. And so I will have to say that in general, because I individualize, all of the plans that I have, the people that work with me, that we are doing that lab testing to actually see where people are. So what I could suggest, though, all the different things that you said, is to make sure that people are going to their doctors and that they're getting their annual exams, and that specifically, if your doctor isn't testing, vitamin D is like the lowest levels I've ever seen have been in this last year. And it's because of exactly what we talked about, but literally the lowest levels I've ever seen have been in the last 12 months because people are, inside so much more. But to make sure that you ask for that and you advocate for that. And if you don't have doctors that are willing to support you in that, then find people that will support you in that, because it's important for you to be your own advocate. And then if you are plant-based and you're a female and you're having some type of menstrual, issues or challenges, I would say make sure that you're checking your iron levels and your ferritin levels, which are your iron stores, because you can get them through plants, but not sometimes if you're having those kinds of issues in the levels that you need. So we want to make sure that, again, you get supplemented for that, because a lot of iron is best absorbed through animal products. So if you are a vegan and you are a woman and you are, menstruating, and particularly if you're menstruating heavily or you're having other, issues related to that, getting those tested to make sure that you're taking iron. And on the flip side of that, if you are a menopausal woman and you are taking a supplement that has iron in it, you might not need it, because you can get the small amounts of iron that you probably need at that time frame through a plant-based diet, so that you don't have to take it. The only other thing I'm going to mention in terms of myths is a lot of people feel like calcium, when you said something about calcium and you're talking about, milk, and people think that they have to get calcium through dairy products. But there are a lot of plants, like for example, broccoli, that has a lot of calcium in it, that you can absorb your calcium through things, and you don't have to use plant dairy-based things in order to get your calcium. And just for everyone to know, our bones are not just made up of calcium, so we need other nutrients besides calcium. So this is why the colors of the rainbow come in, to make sure you're getting your silicon and your boron and your magnesium, your potassium, and these other things that you need as part of your bone matrix. So those are the kinds of things that I think of in terms of myths that people often think you have to have calcium and dairy together.
Can I chime in with a couple more little things?
Sure.
Okay. One, on the iron, absolutely something to keep an eye on for women who are menstruating, but don't take a supplement until, like Dr. Day said, get tested, because that's when you don't want to take it. If you have enough, the extra iron can be bad for you. So that's one to be careful of. I could not agree more on the calcium. You actually absorb calcium from collard greens, which are a superstar for calcium. They have about the same amount as a glass of milk, and you absorb it twice as well. So cooked collard greens for the win. I want people in general, unless there's some very specific reason not to, beans and greens every day, because they have all those bone health nutrients. They have good plant-based protein. They're good for lowering cholesterol. So if you take nothing else away from this and you're interested in plant-based eating, beans and greens. And just one word about tofu, because there's so many myths around it. It is actually eating whole soy foods like edamame, tofu, not the like isolated proteins, but the things that are recognizably soy, linked to a lower risk of getting breast cancer, a lower risk of having a recurrence in women who have had breast cancer, and a lower risk of prostate cancer. So please do not avoid, if you're avoiding tofu because you're afraid it might have a breast health issue, trust me, I've done the research. Go ahead and include it in your diet if it's something you enjoy.
Wonderful. We've been seeing some folks chatting in some great substitutions and recipe tips, which is fantastic. So I'd love to hear from our panelists about your favorite substitutions and recipes, and also how you keep things interesting, how you avoid repetition. If you're, if you have a few recipes that you love, how do you keep mixing it up, keep things fresh with plant-based foods?
Well, I'll start with one. I wish I had a husband who was 100% all in like you, Lee, but I got him Monday through Thursday. So it's a pretty good. But come Friday morning, I'm smelling bacon and eggs. So here's an interesting thing that we do. He loves pasta. He spent 6 years in Italy. He loves pasta and cream sauce, ravioli, gnocchi, whatever it is, and cream sauce. And, we'll put peas and onions and everything with that. Used to put the bacon and stuff. But so what I've been doing lately is I make my cashew cream. Everyone who's in vegan cooking understands cashew cream, but I have a Vitamix, always have had one. I saute onions and 3 cloves of garlic in a little bit of olive oil. And as the garlic is getting soft, in my Vitamix, I put a half a cup of raw cashews, half a cup of water, the 3 cloves of garlic into the Vitamix, and I puree it up. It becomes like cream. And we just had this last night. So that I go back into the pan with the onions or whatever the veggies. Yesterday we had sun-dried tomatoes and other roasted tomatoes in there. And we had a vegan ravioli, and we put it over there and with some fresh basil. And so he swears by this cream sauce, and he's like, I never have to have real cream sauce again. This is it. So half a cup of cashews, half a cup of water, a little bit of soft garlic in there, season it to your taste. We added some pesto with it last night, vegan pesto, and it's amazing. And so many applications for it.
Yeah. Cashew cream is the wonder of vegan cooking for a lot of people. I mean, once you like realize how easy it is to make cashew cream, you really never like look back at that point, because you can always keep a bag of raw cashews stashed in the freezer and you can have cashew cream like that, and you really don't even have to like soak the cashews for hours or anything. I mean, it's just not that big of a deal. So yeah, I mean, I wrote something about for college students a few years back, maybe in like 2016 for the Washington Post. And since my daughter already was vegan, I, just did vegan recipes, and because that's just suited me. And luckily my editor didn't mind. And I did cashew cream as one of the, like, this is a great thing for a dorm room. You have your mini fridge, you have you've got a blender. It doesn't have to be a Vitamix. It can just be any kind of blender. You have your blender, you have some cashews, you have some water, and, you can like be making a vegan nacho sauce in no time. I mean, like, it's a pretty, you can really take a cashew cream and dress it up fast, which is nice. I recently have been very interested in working on pizza recipes. And because I think for a lot of people who are vegan, I think pizza is one of those things that they pine for, the pizza that they remember. Of course, we all know that cheese is a lot of people will say, I can give up meat, but I can't give up cheese. That's often a very common thing that people say. And and there are a lot of vegan cheeses that are being made commercially, and I think some of them are pretty good, but I don't always love them. And so, and I find that for the idea of trying to make, and I have been making pizza at home for decades on Friday nights. And so, and I really had been thinking about like, how do I make a pizza that feels cheesy, but has no cheese? And so, and the place that I really started from is that I have written quite a bit about vegan cheese and spoken to vegan cheese makers, interviewed them, and often the common denominator, and this is what I was talking about, like you can have a few things in your pantry that can just completely change vegan, home cooking if you just have a few things. And one of them is miso, fermented soybean paste. And miso is I think everybody's nodding, but like miso, I think for people who didn't grow up with miso as part of their their home cooking that they grew up on, it's kind of a mystery to a lot of other people. And the thing about miso is that it comes in a really wide range of different flavors, whether it's made with red beans or chickpeas or whatever. There's like a lot of different kinds out there, but keep miso, because miso has a beautiful umami, deep, rich saltiness to it. And when you take miso and you add it to something, you start to get this cheesy flavor out of it. I mean, like, it's kind of a beautiful thing. And so I started caramelizing onions with olive oil and miso. And like, once I did that, I would get, this beautiful, golden, soft, stretchy onions. And when you take those and you put them on a pizza crust and you put that in the oven, I mean, it's like magic, because you really get sort of without, I'm not really about trying to mimic flavors, but I think that you want every bite to be intentional. And so when I started doing this with the onions, these miso caramelized onions, and making it for our friends who are heavy meat eaters, and they have gone crazy for it. I mean, they are just obsessed with it. So, I mean, like, you can do really small things, just make a few small adjustments and come out with something that's will give you some of that kind of flavor and texture that you are craving, and it can be done in a pretty simple way. It just kind of takes learning how to build out your pantry in order to make that happen.
I find that really, really fascinating. I'm going to talk to you about that, Kristen, because we're building a pizza oven, and I don't like the shredded mozz and everything that's out there right now. It just doesn't taste good. And in my gourmet market, we sell 150 different cheeses. I'm part of the Guilde de Fromager in France. I know a lot about cheese, and I don't eat it anymore. And it breaks my heart, because I know a lot of the cheese makers too around the country. And then I started meeting the plant-based cheese makers. And, I just found one today that it's made out of cashew cream. I think cashews, there's something about cashews that, they're better than these other things that they're using. So they're going to get there. They're not there yet, in my opinion. But I'm going to try what you just suggested. I think that's really fascinating.
Well, and I've the other thing that I've done, which I use this for pizza, but for lasagna and stuff too, which is I do a tofu ricotta. Now, lots of people do tofu ricotta, but usually all they do is kind of take tofu and, like, whiz it up, and that's it. And maybe add some salt to it. And that doesn't really, and I think a lot of people who then are sold like, oh, we'll have tofu ricotta, and they take a bite of it and they kind of go, It doesn't really work for me. And so I actually take the tofu and I throw it in the food processor with artichoke hearts that have been marinated in olive oil. So I'm getting the fat, I'm getting this really deep, again, umami is everything, but umami from the artichoke hearts. And again, this is like, and I just wrote about this recently for the Washington Post. And one of my editors there, I mean, who tested the recipe, and he's a great guy, and he's not plant-based, although he's just been making more things because he's interested in it, but he's totally not plant-based. And he said, I was really kind of skeptical about this, that this was not really going to taste like ricotta or anything. And I said, well, my purpose is not to make it taste like ricotta, but I want it to kind of give you the sense of the fattiness and the richness that is really delicious in ricotta without actually being ricotta. And he said, yeah, well, all I know is I'm gonna be making this all the time. But you know, like he said, I was prepared to be skeptical, and instead I was blown away. So so you can, I think it's about, but to me it was about thinking about what is it about, like, tofu ricotta by itself, if you just, like I said, whiz up tofu and add a little salt to it, there's no fat to it, and fat is a flavor carrier, right? So if you don't have that fat in there, then it's not satisfying. But you can use some olive oil, not a terrible fat to use. I mean, it's all in how much it's all the balance of it, right? But so, I mean, there are certain things that you can do that can really change that flavor profile. And I think it sort of starts to bring people on board once they realize that they don't, they don't have to give up on the flavors and the textures that they love. They just have to be done in a little bit of a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that, first of all, I love all these ideas. I'm like, yay, like mental note, like I didn't want to be writing it down in the middle of our conversation. But I want to say, Kristen said this a few times. And so I just want to say how important this is. In my book, which is here in the back, like Eat More Plants, I have a section on pantry items. So because Kristen said it twice, I'm just gonna say this. And I have online courses and classes that I've created. There's a section that I spend on pantry items, because if you have simple pantry items in your pantry, and that could be things that are in the refrigerator, things that are in the freezer, things that are in cans, like what's appropriate for cans, just some basic herbs and spices, it will make a huge difference in the way that you can cook quickly and easily, so it doesn't become like an issue or problem of, I can't do this because I don't have the 20 million ingredients that I need for this particular recipe. It becomes easy, and it becomes really simple. And so one of the things that I'm always doing from a practical perspective is we can give these different recipes, and they're not hard, and you can hear, like, it's just a few ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you just have those few ingredients and you have them in your pantry, then it makes it easier for you to eat and to make things. And so my contribution, before I toss it to Lee, is pestos. I love pestos, and I think pestos can be game changers. And so I love them for a couple of reasons. I love to garden. Anyone who has kids, it's a great activity for them to get them involved in the kitchen. Just have some, parsley, Italian parsley, or make sure that you have some mint, or make sure you have some cilantro. Pestos are very simple because they have that, or basil, which is what the traditional pestos are made with. So you have that, but you could even use spinach or kale. So if you have some nuts and seeds, you have some lemon, you have some olive oil, you have some green leafy herb that is very herbaceous, or combinations of herbs that are herbaceous for you, you can use those. And if you want to throw in, like, cashew gives a nice texture, just like the Parmesan cheese would, and you mix those together, then you can put it on pizza. Like Kristen said, you can put it on pasta. Like Stacey said, you can use it for marinating. You can actually pull roasted vegetables, out of the oven, and you can, sprinkle this on top of what you're eating. So I would say that pestos and playing around with different variations of pestos can be a huge game changer in your foods for being plant-based and kind of upping the level of flavor to whatever it is that you're creating. So that would be, my recommendation for people.
That was amazing.
Are we looking for more tips? Because from a culinary standpoint, I'm still sitting here like miso sauteed onions. That feels like a game changer. I'm with Kristen on the miso train. I was afraid of it because I was like, what is that tub of weird stuff? And then once you use it the first time, it's like putting that on everything. It's going in the salad dressing, it's going in the sautés, it's going in the lasagna with the, oh my God, it sounds amazing. Also, I know this is a culinary audience, but there is something to be said for like survival cooking on a super busy night. Like you can chuck this is going to get me in trouble. I know you can chuck a sweet potato in the microwave and put some black beans and salsa on it and call it a day if you're really desperate. Don't judge me, but some days are just really busy and or there are some actually passable frozen meals out there. If you pair it with a giant salad, the salad bowl that's bigger than your head, that you can do in a pinch. So I'm just, from a culinary standpoint though, I am in the presence of greatness and I stand down.
Well, this is making me super hungry, I gotta say. And we are actually reaching the top of the hour. So I just want to toss it to a few audience questions, although thank you all for answering in the chat. I see we've been having some great discussion and we've already kind of addressed a couple, but one thing that two people have tossed in, and we were also discussing this before we hopped online with everyone, was the plant-based meats and that kind of Beyond Meat, those substitutes. So if anyone wants to take this, maybe just one of you can chime in thoughts on plant-based meat substitutes.
I don't believe in them. I'm sorry. They're not, if someone else wants to chime in, I think that it's a processed, food, and so is a burger. And I don't know, if I can't pronounce the ingredients that are in it, then I don't think, is it better than beef? Yes, but I've tried a lot of them. I've tried the Gardines and I've tried tempeh and I've tried a lot of different things to mimic ground beef or something. And I think I'm just going to throw in the towel because I'll eat my big salad. Can't find anything.
I think, you know what, I think that those, that all these products that, there have been these products have been around for a long time. There have been products that have been around in Chinese culture in Buddhist culture for hundreds of years. Sort of meat analogs, that kind of thing. So I'm not against it. I think those things can be a good gateway for someone who wants to make the leap to plant-based and they are not sure how to do it and they are afraid that can be with guidance. If they have some guidance, that can be a way to get them in. So I'm not going to bash it. I'm not a huge fan, especially I think of a lot of the new products that are out. Even though, I think they're perfectly tasty. I have nothing against that, but they are really fatty. They have a lot of, they're very processed. And I think there were products that were around for decades in the American marketplace by other smaller, usually women-led companies that were doing things, that were making plant-based meats and but organic and trying to do it in a fairly responsible way. And I actually think what's interesting about that is, and I did write a story last year called The Patriarchy of Plant-Based Food. And because the plant-based marketplace has, the plant-based movement really began with women, which I think is why I think it's great that we're having this discussion as part of Daemon. The women really in the United States were where that movement came from. And I think that it's very interesting that once men stepped into the arena, of plant-based food that it has skyrocketed as a business. And so it's kind of interesting when you think about that, and the approach that men, and when I was interviewing someone about this, I thought what was interesting that from the Plant-Based Marketing Association, I mean, she said something that I thought was really interesting, which is that women come to plant-based food really from a completely different place than men. They usually come because there is perhaps a health issue in their family that got them started on trying to figure out how, my child has this rare illness and I'm trying to figure out how to help them be able to eat certain kinds of things. And so maybe that mom ends up starting some kind of a business where she's making some sort of a plant-based, dairy, yogurt or something, right? So she's coming at it from this very different place, whereas men are coming at it from a place that is more scientific and more finance oriented. I see a trend, I can make money at it, and 98% of venture capitalists support male business ventures. So I think it's just kind of an interesting thing, men and women go at this in very different ways.
Yeah. So I found the article that I was talking about earlier. I just put it up in the chat, and this was just published this morning from Fast Company, business oriented magazine, right? And it has they're calling out the plant-based burgers, Impossible Burger and Beyond. Are they healthy? No, they're not healthy. They say it right here in the article, but do they taste good? Yes. And, it was never about being healthy. It was about making something that would taste so good, that would make so much money. And it is making a ton of money. And so read through the article. It's very, very fascinating.
Yeah. So I will have to say that, a couple of years ago, my boyfriend at the time was like, oh my God, you have to have this burger, because when I decided to go plant-based, those burgers didn't. He was like so excited about it. And I hadn't had a burger in like 20 years. And so, having the burger, I was like, for me, it didn't mean anything, because I came to it kind of like how Kristen said, and I walk the talk. I teach people how to eat, in very different ways. And so what I say when people are coming to me with health issues and health concerns is, it is not my recommendation for them to go into having these Beyond Burgers and all of that. I want them to eat more plants. I try to keep it really simple, and people try to make it really complicated. That if we do that, it will make a difference. And so if people want to eat it, I'm not saying that they shouldn't eat it, but I don't want them to think that they're eating it and they're being healthy and they're going to improve their cholesterol levels and all of that from eating those things, those type of plant-based burgers, beyond, whatever they are, because they aren't going to give them those results. But if they do decide to have a lovely soup with legumes in it that has soluble fiber that will bind to the cholesterol and draw it out of the body, then that will absolutely change their health profile. And I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think you can have amazing foods, and that you can get healthy and you can taste great, and you can surprise yourself and surprise your friends with really healthy food without it being a, substitute that's been created in a plant instead of being from plants, right? Like Michael Pollan said, that he said some kind of quote similar to that.
Yeah. So Kristen, I don't know if you've tried it yet. I haven't found the time to do this, but I've been watching a chef out of Canada. I think he's in Toronto, and he's come up with this plant-based burger that he's incorporating the black beans and shredded beets and rice and quinoa and all kinds of stuff. And he does throw some umami stuff in there, and it grills like a burger. And then when you top it with some, grilled onions and tomato and lettuce and your condiments, I do have my favorite vegan mayo, and they swear about it. So that's going to be my next project pretty soon, is coming up with that perfect patty. don't know about calling it a burger, but it will be plant-based, but it's not going to be the fake meat stuff.
I will say one that will give you a run for your money, Stacey, the Noble Burger, and I believe that is a woman-owned company.
Oh, really?
It's a
Noble?
smaller company, and two of them are totally plant-based. They have a spicy Italian that is pretty incredible. It's all like real food ingredients.
Great.
But I'm in agreement with everyone else on particularly the Beyond and Impossible burgers. They are just extra special, unhealthy, greasy. They taste a lot like a regular burger because they're not super great for you like a regular burger. But if you just to change up the texture, sometimes some of those crumbles, there are ones that are worse than others. I would look for one, turn it over, look at the bag. If it's a little lower in oils and particularly the saturated fat, choose that. If that's something that, I will occasionally have. The Beyond Meat makes a frozen crumble that's actually pretty healthy, made out of pea protein. It doesn't have all the weird fake heme iron in it and all that sort of thing. And I'll do that with some cannellini beans in a marinara sauce just to change it up sometimes. And it's not all the time. It shouldn't be an everyday thing. But if you want that just for the texture, just pick the right one. It's like there's healthy and unhealthy versions of everything. But those Impossible and Beyond Burgers, I'm with everyone else. Sorry, not for health.
So I love sushi and I miss that I can't eat it any longer, traditionally made. So what I did recently, and I wish I had a photo of it because it's so pretty. I used to make my own sushi rolls and I still have all my mats and, everything for that. So I'm like, okay, I found a recipe that you take a baked tofu block. So it's firmer, and you take one of the widest grates on your grater and you grate your tofu in a bowl. And then you throw in your favorite vegan mayonnaise or one that you made yourself and sriracha sauce, and you stir it all together. It tastes like spicy crab. So I made sushi with that, put that in the middle. I had beautiful avocados that I had layered over the top. I did use nori for my rice, and sprinkled it with some sesame seeds on top. And then I made a dipping sauce with, beautiful shoyu and wasabi powder and ginger. And we had sushi that night. And I was like, oh my God, the flavor was spot on. The leftovers I made, a sushi bowl with the next day, with cilantro and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, that was absolutely wonderful. And I got to say one more thing that I discovered, which is really, really, really cool. I eat a lot of portobello mushrooms because they're just yummy and meaty. And I discovered a way that if you turn it upside down in a cast iron pan, and I will sprinkle any type of seasonings in there and just a little bit of oil, put another cast iron pan on top of it and weight it down. And you don't want the heat up too high, but it's going to take a good 10 minutes. It compresses that portobello from here down to here. And I did like a shawarma seasoning on it. And then I took all those compressed portobellos, sliced them into thin strips. And we had pitas with portobello shawarmas and, the vegan tzatziki, cucumbers, red onion, all that. And it was amazing, amazing. So fun stuff.
Mushrooms are magic. You can do
I love
so much with mushrooms. Mushrooms are magic. When my daughter was about 7 years old, we were on a trip with my parents in Maine, and we were sitting in this restaurant, and my mom orders lobster. It's Maine, and all of a sudden, my daughter bursts into tears at the table. It's kind of like, what is going on? Why are you crying? And she just looks at me. She says, I'm never gonna know what lobster tastes like. And I was like, okay, so this was kind of like one of these first moments that I'd had with her where, she was sort of not really, questioning, I guess, a little bit. And so I said, okay, so I said, listen, I'm not going to force you to, eat or not eat whatever you want in this moment. So, but I'm never going to cook it for you, and I'm never going to buy it for you. But you're sitting next to your grandmother, and if you want to ask her if you can try her lobster, that is totally up to you. You can really do it. I won't guilt you about it. It's going to be fine. You do what you want to do. So she sits there, okay. So she sits there for a few minutes and then she says, I can't do it. I don't eat meat. I said, okay. And she turned to my mom and she said, can I crack the claw? And, and my mom was sure. So she cracked the claw and she was perfectly happy. And so like the next day, because we were staying in Maine for a couple of weeks, the next day I'm driving down the road and I stopped at this farm stand that we really like. And they had, because it was summer and kind of the time for it, they had these beautiful lobster mushrooms, and which are, it's not so much that they taste like lobster, but they kind of have that look. They have this beautiful red skin to them and they're fleshy and white on the inside and they're very, very firm. And so I thought, well, what the heck? I'm going to buy these lobster mushrooms and I'm going to make lobster rolls. And so I did. And I really did kind of a very classic, recipe. I just used the lobster mushrooms instead of lobster and made them for dinner that night for everybody. My parents loved them. My daughter loved it, and it made her feel like she was having this experience, right? And that is sometimes what's important. It's about having the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think that's a fabulous place to wrap up. I know we could probably talk for another hour about this. You guys have had such amazing insights to share, but I know we're a bit over time and I don't want to keep everyone too late. So thank you so much to all of you panelists for sharing. It's been so wonderful, and thank you for answering questions as well in the chat and in the Q&A feature. I hope that everyone has taken something away, learned something new. I know I certainly have. I'm going to go head down and try some of these recipes and tips in my kitchen right after this. And thank you so much to all of our guests for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you being here. And if you'd like to keep up with future events and programs, please visit our website, lesdamesdc.org. And you can sign up for email updates to hear about future programs. And while you're at it, please consider a donation so we can continue to create these opportunities and support outstanding women in the industry. You can donate directly on our website, or at the bottom of the invitation you received to join us tonight, there's a donate button there. So thank you all so much again, and see you next time. Have a great evening, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.